The moment my boots hit the landing pad, I knew the Arctic was going to be everything they'd warned me about. The wind cut straight through my parka, standard military issue that was supposed to handle extreme conditions but felt about as effective as tissue paper out here. Minus 40 degrees, according to the briefing I'd gotten back in Washington. Felt more like minus 60 with that wind. I grabbed my duffel and hunched forward, squinting against the swirling snow. The helicopter blades were still whipping overhead, throwing up more white powder and making it nearly impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. "Dr. Burke!" someone shouted over the noise. I turned toward the voice and made out a tall figure approaching from what looked like a doorway cut into the ice. Had to be Commander Warner. They'd shown me his file during the briefing. 20 years military, last 5 commanding this godforsaken outpost. The kind of guy who volunteered for Arctic duty. "This way," he yelled, gesturing toward the entrance. I nodded and trudged toward him, the snow crunching under my boots. Each breath felt like inhaling needles. They hadn't really prepared me for this part. How the cold actually felt in your lungs, how it made everything harder. Even walking took more effort than it should. "Welcome to Kepler Station," Warner said as I reached him. He didn't offer to shake hands. Too cold for that kind of formality out here. "Let's get you inside before you freeze solid." The entrance led to an airlock-style chamber. Once the outer door sealed behind us, the temperature immediately jumped about 50 degrees. I started peeling off my outer layers as Warner punched a code into a keypad. "First time in the Arctic?" he asked. "That obvious?" I said, feeling the painful tingling in my fingers as they started to warm up. Everyone has that same look their first time, like they've just realized what cold actually means. He didn't smile when he said it. Not the joking type, apparently. "You'll get used to it, or you won't. Either way, you won't be going outside much." The inner door hissed open, revealing a long corridor carved from what looked like ice but wasn't. Some kind of reinforced polymer designed to insulate and withstand the pressure. The walls gleamed under the fluorescent lighting, giving everything a sterile, almost hospital-like feel. "This is the main access corridor," Warner explained as we walked. "Connects all sections of the station. Living quarters are that way." He pointed down a branching hallway. "Mess hall, rec room, medical. You'll get the tour later. Right now, I'm taking you to Lab 7. I adjusted the strap of my duffel, trying to keep pace with his long strides. I was hoping to get settled in first, maybe grab some coffee. "The team's waiting. Coffee can wait." He glanced at me. "Your clearance level is Theta 4, correct?" "Yes, sir." "Good, because what you're about to see requires it. The Pentagon doesn't send biochemists with your credentials up here to study ice samples." I knew that much. The briefing had been vague but clear that this was high-priority research. Something about non-terrestrial biological compounds and advanced structural properties. Beyond that, they'd been tight-lipped. Just told me I'd be working with a small team on analyzing and potentially weaponizing whatever they'd found up here. We passed through several more security checkpoints, each requiring Warner's fingerprint and retinal scan. The deeper we went, the more serious the security measures became. Whatever was in Lab 7, they were serious about keeping it contained. 3 months ago, Warner said as we approached a heavy blast door, a meteor crashed about 30 miles from here. Small one, about the size of a car. We sent a team to investigate. Standard procedure. What they found wasn't standard. The blast door slid open, revealing an antechamber with lockers and what looked like decontamination equipment. "You'll need to gear up," Warner said, pointing to a locker with my name already stenciled on it. "Full protocol, nothing goes in or out without being processed." I opened the locker to find a white hazmat suit, gloves, and boots. "Level 4 containment? For a meteor sample?" Warner's expression didn't change. "It's not just a meteor." I suited up, questions piling up in my mind. Level 4 was reserved for the most dangerous pathogens on Earth. Ebola, Marburg, things that could wipe out populations if they escaped. What the hell had they found in that ice? Once we were both suited up, Warner led me through another airlock and into Lab 7 proper. The room was large, maybe 40 feet square, filled with advanced equipment, electron microscopes, spectrometers, centrifuges, and other analysis tools I recognized from top-tier research facilities. 3 people in similar hazmat suits were working at different stations, but they all looked up when we entered. "Team, this is Dr. Carl Burke," Warner announced. "He'll be taking over the research project effective immediately." A woman approached, her face partially obscured by her suit's visor. "Joan Meyer," she said, extending a gloved hand. "Biochem. I've been leading the preliminary analysis." I shook her hand. "Good to meet you. What exactly am I looking at here?" Joan glanced at Warner, who nodded. She gestured for me to follow her to the center of the lab, where a large containment chamber stood. Inside, separated from us by several inches of what looked like reinforced glass, was... I'm not sure what I expected. A rock, maybe. Some strange mineral formation. What I saw instead made me stop in my tracks. The object, if you could call it that, was a cluster of crystalline structures, each one growing in a perfect geometric pattern. They were translucent, with a faint bluish luminescence pulsing from within. The largest formations were about the size of my fist, while smaller ones sprouted from their bases like branches. The entire structure seemed to be expanding slowly, building itself one crystal at a time. "What am I looking at?" I asked again, this time barely above a whisper. "We don't know," Joan replied. "Not exactly. It's organic, but not like anything we've ever seen. The crystalline structure contains carbon compounds, but they're arranged in configurations that don't exist in Earth biology." A shorter man stepped forward. "Mickey Garza," he said. "Molecular biology. The internal structure is what's really interesting. These aren't just crystals. They're more like cells. They divide and replicate, but following mathematical patterns that seem predetermined." The third researcher joined us. "Kinsley Curtis," she said. "Xenobiology specialist. We've been testing its reactions to different stimuli. It responds to electromagnetic fields, temperature changes, and certain sound frequencies. Watch this." She moved to a control panel and adjusted a dial. A low-frequency hum filled the room, and the crystal's pulsing glow intensified. The patterns of light changed, becoming more rapid and seemingly more organized. "It's responding," I said, moving closer to the glass. "Almost like it's aware," Kinsley finished. "That's what we've been debating. Is this just a chemical reaction, or is there something more happening here?" Warner cleared his throat. "Dr. Burke, your assignment is to determine what this organism is capable of and how we might harness those capabilities. The Pentagon is particularly interested in the structural properties of these crystals. They're stronger than diamond, but lighter than aluminum, and they appear to store and release energy in ways we don't understand yet." I studied the formation, watching as new crystals began to form along one edge, growing in perfect hexagonal patterns. "Have you extracted any samples for testing?" Joan nodded. "We've removed several smaller formations. They continue to grow in isolation, but more slowly. We've been able to harvest compounds that show promise for everything from body armor to energy storage, but we've barely scratched the surface of what this thing might be capable of." I set my duffel down and stepped closer to the containment chamber. There was something mesmerizing about the pulsing light within the crystals, something almost deliberate in the way the patterns shifted and changed. "How did you contain it initially?" I asked, not taking my eyes off the formation. "With difficulty," Warner replied. "It was smaller when we found it, about the size of a softball. It's grown considerably since then." "And you're sure it's secure?" Mickey nodded. "The chamber is electromagnetically shielded and temperature controlled. We found that keeping it at precisely -5 degrees Celsius slows its growth rate to manageable levels." I nodded, still watching the crystals pulse. There was something about them that bothered me, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. The way the light moved through them wasn't random. It followed patterns that repeated with slight variations, almost like Has anyone analyzed these light patterns? I asked. Run them through pattern recognition software? The team exchanged glances. Not specifically, Joan admitted. We've been focused on the structural and chemical properties. Do it, I said. There's something about the way it's pulsing that seems structured. Warner gave me a look I couldn't quite read. Your quarters are ready whenever you want to get settled. Your security clearance gives you full access to all research data in this lab. I expect weekly reports on your progress. I nodded, but I was still focused on the crystalline formation. I'll start now if that's all right. I'd like to review what you've gathered so far. Warner seemed pleased with my eagerness. I'll leave you to it then. Dr. Meyer can bring you up to speed. After he left, Joan led me to a workstation where she pulled up their research files. We've been documenting everything for the past 3 months. It's a lot to go through. I scrolled through the data, growth rates, chemical analyses, structural tests, reaction experiments. They'd been thorough, but I could already see gaps in their approach. They'd been studying it like a mineral, not a potentially sentient organism. Has it shown any aggressive behavior? I asked. Joan hesitated. Not exactly aggressive, but adaptive. When we first started testing it with electromagnetic pulses, it seemed to resist. After a few days, it began absorbing the energy instead. When we tried containing a sample in a titanium case, it eventually developed crystals that could erode the metal. It learns, I murmured. Or evolves, Mickey added from across the lab. Really quickly. Over the next several hours, I immersed myself in their research, occasionally asking questions or examining the organism directly. The more I learned, the more fascinated and unsettled I became. The crystals contained compounds that could revolutionize everything from medicine to weapons technology. They grew in mathematically perfect formations that defied natural explanation. They responded to stimuli in ways that suggested some form of awareness, and they were still growing. 3 months into my assignment, I'd settled into a routine. Wake up, shower, grab coffee from the mess hall, and head straight to Lab 7. The rest of the station barely existed for me anymore, just a place to sleep between research sessions. We'd made significant progress. I'd managed to harvest several compounds that showed immense promise. One created a lightweight material 5 times stronger than Kevlar. Another stored electrical energy with efficiency that made lithium-ion batteries look primitive. The Pentagon was ecstatic with our weekly reports, already talking about applications and production timelines. But something still bothered me. I was in the lab late one night, or what passed for night in the perpetual darkness of Arctic winter, running tests on the organism's response to different light wavelengths. Joan, Mickey, and Kinsley had already turned in for the evening, leaving me alone with the crystalline formation. I switched the light from infrared to ultraviolet, watching as the crystal's internal luminescence shifted in response. The patterns changed, becoming more complex, more deliberate. I'd been documenting these responses for weeks now, running the patterns through analysis software. The results were disturbing. The light pulses weren't random. They showed signs of organization similar to basic communication systems. Not language exactly, but definitely not random chemical reactions either. As I adjusted the UV intensity, the crystals pulsed more rapidly. New growth appeared along one edge, forming a perfect spiral pattern that hadn't been there before. I moved closer to the containment chamber, watching the formation. The main mass was now the size of a beach ball, with intricate branches extending in all directions. Beautiful in an alien way. But what really unsettled me was how it seemed to respond differently when I was alone with it. The patterns were more complex, more varied, almost as if it was trying to communicate specifically with me. I switched off the UV light, and the formation immediately dimmed its internal glow, except for one small section near the front, which continued to pulse in a steady rhythm. I'd never seen it isolate illumination like that before. I stepped closer, fascinated and uneasy at the same time. The pulsing crystal was aimed directly at where I stood. As I moved slightly to the left, the pulsing crystal rotated to track my movement. It was watching me. I backed away slowly, my heart rate increasing. This wasn't in any of our previous observations. The organism had never demonstrated this kind of focused attention before. Or maybe it had, and we just hadn't noticed. I grabbed my tablet and started recording, narrating what I was seeing in a low voice. Subject is exhibiting targeted luminescence, tracking observer movements. Pattern appears deliberate, not reactive. The crystal pulsed brighter for a moment, almost as if responding to my voice. Then the pattern changed again, becoming more complex, more rapid. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the lab's temperature controls. What exactly were we dealing with here? Not just an alien organism with useful properties, but something potentially aware, something watching us as we studied it. I spent the rest of the night reviewing all our footage, looking for similar incidents. There were subtle signs I'd missed before, changes in growth patterns that corresponded with who was in the lab, variations in luminescence that seemed to track our research progress. The crystals weren't just growing, they were adapting, learning, maybe even communicating. And as I watched the latest footage of the formation, tracking my movements with its pulsing light, a disturbing question formed in my mind. What if we weren't the ones doing the studying? What if, all this time, it had been studying us? The blizzard outside had been getting worse all day. I'd been watching it between sample runs, those brief moments when the centrifuge was spinning and I had nothing to do but stare at the wall of white beyond the reinforced windows. The station's weather system had upgraded it to Category 5 around noon. Not that it mattered much down here in Lab 7, 40 feet below the surface, but it meant no supply drops and definitely no chance of getting additional equipment shipped in. I hunched over my microscope, adjusting the focus on the latest crystal sample. We'd been taking daily core samples, tracking the changes in the crystalline structure. Today's sample looked different. The molecular arrangement was tighter, more organized. That's new, I muttered to myself, making notes on my tablet. The lab was quiet this evening. Joan had gone to grab dinner, Mickey was reviewing data in his office, and Kinsley was off shift. I preferred working alone sometimes, gave me space to think without explaining every observation. The sample under the microscope pulsed faintly. I'd gotten used to that. The organism maintained some bioelectrical activity even when separated from the main mass. But this pulse seemed stronger, more rhythmic. I checked the time, 22:17 hours, February 14th. Valentine's Day, not that anyone here was celebrating. Hard to feel romantic when you're studying an alien life form in the middle of nowhere. I glanced at the main containment chamber across the lab. The crystal formation inside had grown considerably over the past week, now roughly the size of a small car. Its usual soft blue glow seemed brighter tonight. My monitoring tablet chimed. I looked down at the screen and frowned. The environmental sensors were picking up increased electrical activity within the containment unit. Temperature was rising too, up 2 degrees in the last hour. I stood up and walked over to the main console, pulling up the complete monitoring data. All readings were showing unusual spikes, electrical activity, cellular division rates, energy output. The pattern was clear. The organism was becoming more active. I tapped the intercom. "Mickey, you seeing these readings?" No response. He must have stepped out or fallen asleep at his desk again. Wouldn't be the first time. The lights in the lab flickered briefly. I looked up, then back at the containment chamber. The crystal formation was definitely brighter now, pulsing with an intensity I hadn't seen before. The blue luminescence had taken on a greenish tinge at the edges. I moved closer to the observation window, tablet in hand. The crystals were moving, not just growing, actually shifting position, rearranging themselves. The central mass was developing what looked like branches or tendrils, extending toward the walls of the chamber. "What the hell are you doing?" I whispered, more to myself than to the organism. The tablet chimed again. Growth rate had doubled in the last 5 minutes. This wasn't normal. even for something that had never been normal to begin with. I needed to alert the team. I turned toward the intercom again, but stopped when I noticed something on the containment chamber's interior wall. A thin crystalline film was spreading across the reinforced glass, forming intricate patterns that reminded me of frost on a window. Except this frost was growing from the inside out, and it was the same luminescent blue-green as the main formation. Shit! I stepped back, hitting the emergency monitoring protocols on my tablet. The system began recording at maximum resolution, capturing everything from multiple angles. The growth was accelerating. I could actually see it spreading now, not needing time-lapse to track its movement. The tendrils had reached the walls of the chamber and were branching out in all directions, creating a web-like network across the interior surface. I grabbed my radio. "Commander Warner, this is Burke. We have unusual activity in Lab 7. The specimen is exhibiting unprecedented growth patterns, requesting immediate." The radio crackled with static, cutting me off. I tried again, nothing but white noise. The lights flickered again, longer this time. When they stabilized, I noticed the environmental control panel was flashing red. Internal pressure in the containment unit was rising. The chamber was designed to withstand significant pressure variations, but everything had limits. I needed to get the team down here. I headed for the lab door, intending to trigger the general alert from the hallway panel. Before I reached it, the door burst open. Joan rushed in, her face pale, hair escaping from her usually neat bun. "Carl, we've got a situation." She stopped, seeing my expression. "You've noticed too." "The organism's growth rate has more than doubled," I said, "and it's developing some kind of film on the containment walls." "It's not just here," she said, breathing hard like she'd run all the way. "We're seeing crystal formations in sectors 3 and 4. They're coming through the ventilation system." My stomach dropped. "That's impossible. The containment unit is sealed. Nothing gets in or out without a breach." Joan moved to the main console, pulling up station schematics. "Look." The screen showed a cross-section of Kepler Station. Red dots were appearing throughout the lower levels, spreading outward from Lab 7. "How long has this been happening?" I asked, moving beside her. "Hard to say. The first formations were noticed about 20 minutes ago by maintenance. They thought it was some kind of ice buildup from the storm affecting the internal systems. Then they started growing." I looked back at the containment chamber. The crystal web had now covered almost the entire interior surface. The main mass had changed shape, becoming more elongated, almost pillar-like. The luminescence was bright enough now that I had to squint, looking directly at it. "We need to talk to Warner," I said. "My radio's not working." "Communications are going down all over the station," Joan said. "Internal systems are still operational, but external links are dead. Mickey thinks the crystal formations might be interfering with the signal somehow." I walked to the observation window, keeping a safe distance. The crystal formation had changed again, developing what looked almost like facets or planes, reflecting light in new patterns. It was beautiful in a terrifying way. "Have you seen any formations in here, outside the containment unit?" I asked. Joan shook her head. "Not yet, but..." She stopped, staring past me at something near the ceiling. I followed her gaze. There, emerging from a ventilation grate near the top of the wall, was a thin crystalline tendril. It glistened in the lab lights, the same blue-green color as the formation in the chamber. As we watched, it extended further, branching and spreading along the wall like a living vein. "That's not possible," I whispered. "The ventilation system for this lab is completely separate from the rest of the station. It has to be for containment protocols." "Clearly, something's changed," Joan said, backing away from the wall. "We need to get out of here, Carl. Now." I couldn't argue with that. Whatever was happening, staying in this lab wasn't safe. I grabbed my tablet and research notes while Joan collected core samples from the refrigeration unit. Another tendril appeared from a different vent, this one growing faster. The crystals spread across the ceiling in an intricate pattern, dripping down toward the floor like some kind of mineral stalactite. "Leave it," I told Joan as she reached for another sample case. "We've got enough." We headed for the door, moving quickly but trying not to panic. The lab's lights flickered again as we reached the hallway, plunging everything into darkness for a moment before the emergency systems kicked in. Red warning lights bathed the corridor in an eerie glow. The hallway wasn't much better than the lab. Crystal formations had emerged from vents and junction boxes along the ceiling, spreading down the walls. They emitted that same blue-green light, bright enough now that the emergency lighting seemed redundant. "My God," Joan whispered. "It's everywhere." She was right. The organism had somehow infiltrated the station's infrastructure. I could see formations spreading along electrical conduits, following the paths of wiring and ventilation systems. Some had already reached the floor, creating delicate crystal columns that grew visibly as we watched. "We need to find Mickey and Kinsley," I said, "then get to the upper levels." We moved down the corridor toward the main research hub, careful not to touch any of the crystal growths. The formations seemed to be concentrated around electrical systems and air vents, anything connected to the station's infrastructure. "How is this happening?" Joan asked as we navigated around a cluster of crystals blocking part of the hallway. "The containment protocols must have failed somehow," I finished for her. "Or maybe we underestimated what we were dealing with. This thing might be more adaptable than we thought." The building shook suddenly, the floor vibrating beneath our feet. A distant boom echoed through the structure, followed by another, closer this time. "What was that?" Joan grabbed my arm to steady herself. "Sounded like an explosion." I looked around, trying to get my bearings. Lower levels, maybe the power plant or oxygen recycling. Another boom, definitely closer. The lights flickered again. The station's intercom system crackled to life, Commander Warner's voice coming through with bursts of static. "Attention all personnel. This is not a drill. We have a station-wide containment breach. Proceed immediately to upper levels for evacuation. I repeat, all personnel evacuate to surface levels immediately." Joan and I exchanged glances. "Evacuation? In this blizzard?" she said. "Must be bad if Warner's willing to risk that," I replied. "Come on, we need to find the others." We continued down the corridor, moving faster now. The crystal formations were more extensive as we approached the central hub, covering entire sections of wall. Some had developed complex structures, almost architectural in their arrangement. The blue-green light they emitted created strange shadows, making the familiar hallways seem alien. We reached the hub, a circular room with corridors branching off in several directions. Mickey was there, along with 2 security officers I recognized but didn't know well. They were setting up some kind of barrier using portable containment shields. "Burke! Meyer!" Mickey looked up as we entered. "Thank God, we've been trying to reach you." "Communications are down," I said. "What's happening? Where's Kinsley?" "Last I heard, she was in Lab 3 with the medical team," Mickey said. He looked terrible, pale and sweating despite the cool temperature. "They're treating some of the maintenance crew who came in contact with the crystals." "Came in contact?" Joan moved closer to him. "What happened to them?" Mickey rubbed his forehead, wincing. "It's not good. The crystals seem to attach themselves to organic material. We've got people with growths on their skin, spreading fast. Medical's trying to remove them, but..." He trailed off, the implication clear. Another explosion rocked the station, closer this time. One of the security officers swore. "That was the auxiliary power core," he said. "Main systems could go any minute." "We need to move," the other officer added. "Commander's orders are to get all research personnel to the surface." I nodded, but couldn't help asking, "What about containment? If we evacuate, what happens to the station, to the organism?" The first officer's expression was grim. "Commander Warner has initiated Protocol Omega." I knew what that meant. If the station couldn't be secured, it would be destroyed, along with everything and everyone still inside. standard procedure for catastrophic containment breaches of unknown biological threats. How long? I asked. 30 minutes from his order, the officer replied. That was about 5 minutes ago. 25 minutes to get out. I looked at the crystal formations spreading across the hub. They'd grown even in the short time we'd been standing there, some now forming complex geometric patterns that pulsed with light. Let's move, I said. We headed toward the main elevator shaft that led to the upper levels. The security officers took the lead, with Mickey between Joan and me. I noticed he was having trouble walking straight, occasionally reaching for the wall to steady himself. "Mickey, you okay?" I asked quietly. "Headache," he muttered. "Started about an hour ago. Getting worse." I exchanged a concerned glance with Joan. "Did you come in contact with any of the crystal formations?" "No," he said quickly. Too quickly, maybe. "Just a headache. Stress, probably." I wasn't convinced, but now wasn't the time to push it. We needed to keep moving. The corridor leading to the elevator was partially blocked by crystal growths. They'd formed a kind of archway, extending from both walls and meeting in the middle. The security officers stopped, examining the formation. "We'll have to go through," one said. "Stay in the middle. Don't touch anything." We proceeded carefully. The crystal arch pulsed with light as we passed beneath it, the luminescence intensifying briefly. I couldn't help noticing how the formations had changed. Earlier, they'd been haphazard, spreading randomly. Now they showed clear patterns, almost deliberate in their arrangement. The organism wasn't just growing, it was building. We reached the elevator only to find it non-operational. The doors were partially open, revealing an elevator shaft now lined with crystal formations. They covered the cables and mechanism completely. "Stairs," the security officer said, pointing to an emergency exit nearby. The stairwell was mostly clear, though small crystal formations had begun to appear around light fixtures and door frames. We started climbing, the security officers leading the way. Mickey was struggling, moving slower with each flight. "Talk to me, Garza," I said, using his last name to snap him to attention. "What's really going on with you?" He stopped on a landing, leaning against the wall. "The headaches. They're not just pain. I'm hearing things." "Hearing what?" Joan asked, concern etching her features. Mickey looked at us, his eyes bloodshot. "Whispers, like someone's talking just at the edge of hearing. I can't make out the words, but..." He swallowed hard. "I think it's trying to communicate." "What is?" I pressed, though I already knew the answer. "The crystals," he said. "The organism. Whatever it is. It's in my head somehow." He winced again, pressing his palms against his temples. Getting louder. I looked at Joan, seeing my own fear reflected in her eyes. If Mickey was right, the organism wasn't just physically spreading through the station. It was affecting us directly, somehow. "We need to get him to medical," Joan said. "No time," the security officer called down from above. "We've got 15 minutes before Protocol Omega. Medical team should already be evacuating to the surface." Mickey straightened up, visibly pulling himself together. "I can make it. Let's go." We continued climbing. 4 more flights to the surface level. The crystal formations became less common as we ascended, but they were still present, particularly around electrical systems. The station's infrastructure was being transformed, metal and concrete giving way to crystalline structures that seemed to serve the same functions, but in ways I couldn't begin to understand. We reached a security checkpoint on the level just below the surface. Several station personnel were gathered there, being processed through by security officers. Commander Warner stood at a control panel, overseeing the evacuation. "Burke," he nodded when he saw us. "Meyer, Garza. Good. We've got transport waiting on the surface. Blizzard's still raging, but we've got no choice." "What about Kinsley?" Joan asked. "And the medical team?" "Curtis is already on the surface with the first evacuation group," Warner replied. "Medical sent up their critical patients, but Dr. Levine and 2 nurses are still treating people on level 2. Mickey suddenly doubled over, crying out in pain. Joan and I caught him before he could fall. "What's wrong with him?" Warner demanded. He's been experiencing severe headaches, I explained, and possibly auditory hallucinations. He thinks the organism is trying to communicate with him somehow. Warner's expression darkened. Get him through processing now. We've seen similar symptoms in others who've had prolonged exposure to the formations. Security officers helped Mickey toward the checkpoint where they were scanning everyone before allowing them to proceed to the surface. I noticed they were using some kind of handheld device I hadn't seen before. What are they checking for? I asked Warner. Contamination, he said grimly. We've discovered the organism can transfer microscopic crystal structures to human tissue. We're screening everyone before evacuation. I watched as they scanned Mickey. The device beeped loudly, and the security officer looked up with concern. Sir, he called to Warner, we've got positive readings, early-stage contamination, concentrated in the cerebral region. Mickey looked back at us, his face a mask of fear and confusion. Carl, I can hear it clearly now. It's saying it wants to help us. Mickey's eyes were freaking me out. Those gold flecks hadn't been there yesterday, tiny specks like metal shavings suspended in his irises. But that wasn't the worst part. They moved. Not with his pupils, but independently, drifting across his eyes in patterns that didn't match his eye movements at all. You feeling all right? I asked him. We were in the makeshift medical bay Commander Warner had set up on the upper level. After Mickey's scan came back positive for contamination, they'd brought us all here for monitoring. The storm was still raging outside, evacuation impossible until it cleared. Mickey nodded, but I could tell he was lying. His hands trembled slightly as he gripped the edge of the examination table. It's not painful, he said finally. Just weird. Like I can see things differently now. Colors are brighter. And there's this buzzing in my head, but it's not exactly a sound. I glanced at the security officers stationed by the door. They were keeping armed personnel around all the contaminated staff now. Couldn't blame them, really. Nobody knew what we were dealing with. The voice still there? I asked, keeping my voice low. Mickey hesitated, then nodded. Clearer now. Not really words, more like concepts, impressions. It's hard to explain. He rubbed at his temples. Dr. Howard said my brain activity is off the charts, parts lighting up that shouldn't be active at the same time. Dr. Catherine Howard was the station's lead medical researcher, now tasked with figuring out what the hell was happening to us. She'd been running tests nonstop since the containment breach. They're going to find a way to help you, I said, not entirely convinced myself. Just hang in there. A commotion from across the room drew our attention. Kinsley was awake again, and it wasn't good. She'd been sedated earlier after becoming agitated, but whatever they'd given her wasn't working anymore. Get them out, she screamed, her voice raw and desperate. They're under my skin. Get them out. I rushed over with 2 medical techs. Kinsley was clawing at her arms, leaving bloody trails where her nails dug deep. Her eyes were wild, unfocused. She didn't seem to recognize any of us. Hold her arms, Dr. Howard ordered as she prepared another sedative. I grabbed Kinsley's right arm while a tech took her left. She was surprisingly strong, thrashing against our grip. Blood smeared across my hands as I tried to restrain her without causing more damage. Kinsley, it's Carl, I said firmly. You're safe. Nothing's under your skin. Her eyes locked onto mine for just a second, and I saw pure terror there. They're moving, she whispered. I can feel them crawling. Please, Carl, please get them out. Dr. Howard administered the sedative, and gradually Kinsley's struggles weakened. Her breathing slowed, but her eyes remained open, darting around the room at things none of us could see. That's the 3rd episode today, Dr. Howard said quietly. Each one worse than the last. She gestured for a nurse to clean and bandage Kinsley's self-inflicted wounds. The hallucinations are becoming more intense. Is it the same for all the infected? I asked. Howard shook her head. That's what's strange. The symptoms vary wildly from person to person. Mickey hears voices but remains calm. Kinsley has violent hallucinations. 2 maintenance workers developed seizures. Joan's been experiencing some kind of synesthesia, says she can see sounds. I looked back at Kinsley, now lying still, but with eyes still moving frantically beneath half-closed lids. It's targeting the brain. Seems that way, Howard agreed. But why differently in each person? That's what I can't figure out. I returned to my own bed, exhausted despite having done nothing all day, but wait. The medical bay was crowded with cots and monitoring equipment. About a dozen staff members were showing signs of contamination now, each isolated in their own section with monitoring equipment. Warner had stopped by earlier, looking haggard and stressed. The evacuation plans were on hold until the storm passed, which meteorology predicted wouldn't be for another 2 days at least. In the meantime, we were stuck here with whatever was happening to us. I lay back, staring at the ceiling, trying to ignore the dull headache that had started forming behind my eyes. Just stress, I told myself. Just the situation getting to me. That night, I didn't sleep much. Nobody did. Kinsley's screams came intermittently, piercing through the medical bay despite the sedatives they kept pumping into her. Mickey sat upright in his bed, staring at nothing, occasionally nodding as if responding to someone none of us could hear. By morning, I knew something was wrong with me too. I noticed it in the shower, one of the few luxuries still allowed to us. The water hit my arm, and I could see the blue network of veins beneath my skin more clearly than I should have. I rubbed my forearm, thinking it was a trick of the light. But no, my skin was different. Not quite transparent, but translucent, like tissue paper held up to light. I stared at my arms, my chest, turning them this way and that under the shower spray. The effect was subtle, but undeniable. I could see the webwork of veins beneath, pulsing slightly with each heartbeat. When I pressed a finger against my forearm, I could watch the blood vessels compress and then fill again when I released the pressure. I didn't report it. Not yet. I told myself I wanted to be sure before alarming anyone, but the truth was simpler. I was afraid. Afraid of what it meant. Afraid of being further isolated. Afraid of ending up like Kinsley, strapped to a bed and screaming about things crawling under her skin. Instead, I got dressed and went to breakfast in the cafeteria, now serving as a gathering place for those of us under observation, but not yet displaying severe symptoms. Joan was there, looking tired but composed, pushing eggs around her plate without eating. "How's Kinsley?" she asked when I sat across from her. "Not good," I admitted. "The hallucinations are getting worse." Joan nodded, then leaned closer. "I've been experiencing some things too," she whispered. "Colors when people talk, and I can feel vibrations from everything. The floor, the walls, even the air." I hesitated, then rolled up my sleeve slightly. "Look at this," I said quietly. "In the right light." She studied my forearm, then her eyes widened. "Your veins," she murmured. "I can see them so clearly." She reached out, touching my skin gently. "And they're glowing?" "Very faintly, but..." I pulled my arm back, rolling the sleeve down. "It wasn't like this yesterday." "What do you think it means?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But I don't think this is a disease, not in the traditional sense." Joan pushed her plate away. "It's changing us, deliberately." I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was mounting. Whatever this crystalline organism was, it wasn't just infecting us, it was transforming us. The next day, my condition progressed. The translucency spread across my entire body, and now there was a faint luminescence to my veins, visible in dimmer lighting. I couldn't hide it anymore, especially when Dr. Howard spotted it during her rounds. "How long has this been happening?" she demanded, examining my arm under a penlight. "Started yesterday," I admitted. "Got worse overnight." She frowned, taking samples, blood, skin scrapings, even a small biopsy that hurt like hell. "Your blood work from yesterday was already showing anomalies," she said. "Elevated neurotransmitter levels, unusual protein structures I couldn't identify." "What does it mean?" "I'm not sure yet. But you're the fourth case with this particular symptom. She made notes on her tablet. Any other changes? Sensory, cognitive, anything unusual? I almost said no, but then remembered something odd from that morning. Actually, yes. When I touched the metal railing in the shower, I felt something, like a humming, not with my ears, but through my fingers. Howard's expression tightened. Describe it more specifically. It was like I could feel the structure of the metal, its density, temperature, even tiny vibrations running through it. I paused, struggling to explain. And when I passed the electrical panel in the hallway, I felt something different, a sort of buzzing field around it. Electromagnetic sensitivity, she murmured, making more notes. Fascinating. Fascinating isn't the word I'd use, I said. Terrifying seems more appropriate. She gave me a sympathetic look. I understand this is frightening, Carl, but from a scientific perspective, what's happening to you all is unprecedented. The organism seems to be enhancing certain neural pathways, creating new sensory capabilities. At what cost? I asked. Look at Kinsley. Look at Mickey talking to voices that aren't there. I don't have those answers yet, she admitted, but we're working around the clock. Commander Warner has requested additional medical support as soon as the storm clears. But the storm didn't clear. If anything, it intensified, howling around the station like a living thing. And we continued to change. By the third day after the containment breach, my transformation was impossible to ignore. My skin had become so translucent that in certain light, I looked like a living anatomy model. The network of veins glowed with a faint bluish tinge, pulsing with my heartbeat. And my sensory perception had amplified beyond anything I could have imagined. When I touched a surface, I didn't just feel its texture or temperature. I sensed its molecular structure, the density of its components, the electrical charges running through it. Walking past computers or electrical systems bombarded me with information about their electromagnetic fields, data flowing through circuits like rivers of light I could somehow perceive without seeing. It should have been overwhelming, but somehow my brain adapted, processing this flood of new sensory input as if I'd been born with these abilities. That was perhaps the most disturbing part, how natural it felt, how quickly I accepted these impossible perceptions as normal. Mickey's condition had stabilized in its own strange way. The golden flecks in his eyes had multiplied until his irises were more gold than brown, constantly shifting in mesmerizing patterns. He'd stopped talking much to the rest of us, spending hours staring at complex mathematical equations he'd write on any available surface. When Dr. Howard tested his cognitive abilities, he solved complex problems that should have been beyond him, explaining solutions through intuitive leaps that left the researchers baffled. Kinsley was sedated most of the time now. When conscious, she alternated between periods of terrified screaming and eerie calm, during which she described visions of distant worlds with impossible geometries and physics. During one such period, she accurately described the crystalline structure of the organism down to its molecular arrangement, despite having no way to observe it from the medical bay. And through it all, I began to feel something else, a presence at the edges of my consciousness. Not a voice like Mickey described, but a sense of something else sharing my mind, observing through my eyes, learning from my thoughts. It never communicated directly, but its attention shifted when I focused on certain concepts or memories, like a curious child peering over my shoulder at an interesting book. I tried explaining this to Dr. Howard, who listened with scientific detachment while updating my file. It's like it's using me to understand, I told her, learning about humans through me. The organism? She asked. Yes. No. I don't know. I ran a hand through my hair, frustrated. It feels bigger than just the crystals we found, like that was just a small piece of something much larger, something that exists differently than we do. Different how? Not bound by the same physical laws, not limited to one form or place. I struggled to articulate concepts I barely understood myself. The crystals are just an interface, a way for it to interact with our world. Howard studied me carefully. "Carl, I need to know. Are you still yourself? Do you feel like your thoughts are your own?" The question hit me harder than I expected. Was I still myself? I considered it carefully before answering. "Yes," I said finally. "But I'm also more. Like parts of my brain that were dormant have woken up. I'm still Carl Burke, but with expanded perception." I met her eyes directly. "I'm not being controlled, if that's what you're asking." She nodded, seemingly satisfied. "And the organism, or whatever it is, what do you think it wants?" "To understand," I said immediately, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "It's curious. We're as alien to it as it is to us." On the 5th day, I found Joan in the cafeteria during what passed for lunch hour. I almost didn't recognize her. She sat alone at a corner table, her back to the room. As I approached, I noticed something protruding from the collar of her shirt. Crystalline structures, geometric and precise, growing from her spine. They caught the light, refracting it into prismatic patterns across the table. "Joan," I said softly. She turned, and I had to fight the urge to step back. The crystals had spread along her shoulders and partway up her neck, following what I assumed was her nervous system. They weren't random growths, but organized patterns, beautiful in their symmetry, despite the horror of seeing them embedded in human flesh. Her eyes were clear, though, still recognizably Joan's. She smiled at me, but when she opened her mouth, no words came out, just a series of clicking sounds, rhythmic and patterned. I stared, uncomprehending, and she looked frustrated. She tried again, the clicks changing in pitch and tempo. Then she grabbed a napkin and a pen from her pocket, writing quickly. "Can still think clearly. Can't speak normally anymore. Brain rewired language centers." "My God, Joan," I whispered, sitting across from her. "Does it hurt?" She shook her head, writing again. "No pain. Different way of processing information now. The clicks follow mathematical progressions, more efficient than English." I reached out tentatively, my fingertips hovering near one of the crystal formations on her collarbone. "May I?" She nodded, and I gently touched the structure. Immediately, I felt a resonance through my altered nervous system, information flooding into me. Not words or images, but pure concepts transmitted directly from her mind to mine. I pulled back, gasping. I felt what you were thinking," I said, stunned. "About the research team in Sector 4, about the patterns you've been documenting." Joan didn't look surprised. She wrote, "Crystals conduct neural signals between compatible systems. We're becoming compatible." The implications hit me like a physical blow. "It's not killing us," I said slowly. "It's transforming us into something that can communicate with it, something that can understand it." She nodded, writing one more sentence that chilled me to my core. Not just communicate, become part of it. I left Joan in the cafeteria, my mind reeling. In the corridor, I passed other staff members in various stages of transformation. Some showed physical changes like Joan and myself, others displayed new behaviors or abilities. A technician I barely knew stood facing a wall, hand pressed against it, eyes closed in concentration. As I passed, I felt a surge of data through my enhanced senses. He was interfacing directly with the station's electrical systems, his nervous system adapted to process the information flow. The station itself was changing too. Crystal formations had spread throughout, following electrical conduits and ventilation systems. They no longer seemed random or invasive, but purposeful, like a new kind of infrastructure being integrated with the human-built environment. I made my way to the communications center, wanting to check if the storm had abated at all. The room was empty except for a single operator monitoring the equipment. On one of the screens, I saw Commander Warner's face, recording what looked like a log entry. His eyes had the same golden flecks as Mickey's, but more pronounced, almost overtaking the iris entirely. "Day 5 of the containment situation," Warner was saying, his voice steady but with an unusual resonance that made the hairs on my neck stand up. The storm continues unabated, almost as if it's responding to the changes within the station. Perhaps it is. Our understanding of what's possible has expanded. He paused, looking directly into the camera. I've seen things that can't be explained by our current scientific framework. Geometries that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. Patterns that extend beyond our perception of time. The organism isn't just a biological entity. It's a fragment of something vast, something that exists across multiple dimensions. Warner's expression shifted, becoming almost reverent. It's showing me worlds beyond our own, stars with impossible spectra, civilizations built from thought rather than matter. I understand now why it came here, why it chose us. We're at an evolutionary crossroads, and it's offering us a path forward. The recording ended, and I stood there, processing what I'd heard. Warner had been one of the last holdouts, insisting on maintaining quarantine protocols and military discipline, if he'd succumbed to the organism's influence. The communications operator turned to me, and I noticed the same translucency in his skin that I had developed, the same faint glow of altered veins. "Commander's been making these recordings every few hours," he said. "Each one stranger than the last. Started talking about seeing other worlds yesterday." "Is he still in command?" I asked. The operator shrugged. "Technically, but the chain of command doesn't seem to matter much anymore. Everyone's changing, finding their own way to connect with whatever this is." I nodded, understanding all too well. The hierarchies and structures we'd built our lives around were dissolving in the face of something that operated on principles we were only beginning to comprehend. "Any word on the storm?" I asked. "Still Category 5, no sign of letting up." He glanced at the weather monitors. "Might be part of it, you know. The organism. Keeping us isolated while the change is complete." The thought had occurred to me as well. Nothing about this situation seemed random anymore. Not the meteor crash site so close to our research station, not the timing of the containment breach, not even the storm that kept us cut off from the outside world. What happens when the storm ends? I wondered aloud. When they send rescue teams? The operator looked at me, his altered eyes reflecting the monitor lights. "Guess that depends on what we've become by then." I left the communications center more unsettled than before. In the corridor, I paused at a viewport, looking out at the swirling white chaos of the blizzard. Somewhere out there was the rest of humanity, unaware of what was happening here, unprepared for what we were becoming. And as I stood there, the presence in my mind grew stronger, more defined. Not invasive, but curious, showing me glimpses of possibilities, of what awaited us on the other side of this transformation. Vast networks of consciousness spanning galaxies, existence unbounded by physical form, evolution beyond anything humans had imagined possible. I pressed my hand against the cold glass, watching the glow of my altered veins pulse with my heartbeat. Through my enhanced senses, I could feel the crystalline structures spreading throughout the station, connecting us all into something new, something unprecedented. We weren't just being changed, we were being remade. I took a good look at my hand, holding it up to the overhead light. It wasn't my hand anymore, not really. The skin had this weird translucence to it, like those anatomical models where you can see all the parts underneath. My veins glowed blue-green, pulsing with each heartbeat. 3 weeks since the outbreak. 3 weeks of watching myself change. "Carl, you with us?" Joan's voice pulled me back. We were in the mess hall. What was left of our research team had gathered around a table. Joan, Mickey, me, and a couple of techs whose names I still mixed up. Commander Warner was down in communications, trying to get any signal out through the storm. "Yeah, sorry," I said, folding my fingers into a fist. "Just distracted." Joan nodded, understanding. Her own transformation had progressed differently than mine. The crystalline structures had spread across her shoulders and upper back, forming an intricate lattice that caught the light. When she moved, they made this soft clicking sound. "We were talking about the power fluctuations," she said, her speech slightly altered by the changes to her vocal cords. "Level 3 is completely dark now." Mickey tapped his tablet, the screen reflecting off those golden flecks in his eyes. "Temperature's dropping in the East Wing too. We might need to consolidate everyone to the central hub if we can't stabilize it." I rubbed my temples, trying to focus. The headaches came and went now, usually when I was fighting against the constant stream of information, memories, whatever the organism was feeding into my consciousness. "I can take a look at the electrical systems," I offered. The others exchanged glances. They knew what I meant. Not just inspect, interface. "You sure that's safe?" asked one of the techs. Davis, I think. "Safe isn't really our priority anymore," I said, getting to my feet. "Surviving is." The corridor to the main power distribution node was dark, emergency lights casting long shadows. I walked carefully, my boots crunching on tiny crystal formations that had spread across the floor like frost. The temperature here had dropped enough that I could see my breath. This wasn't my first trip to fix something. I discovered this ability about a week ago when the communications array had failed. I'd been helping Warner assess the damage, and when I touched the exposed wiring, something happened. A connection. Information flowing both ways. I found the access panel and pulled it open, revealing the complex array of circuits and control systems inside. Taking a deep breath, I removed my glove and placed my bare hand against the exposed wiring. The sensation was immediate, a rush of data flooding into my mind. I could feel the electrical pathways throughout the station like they were extensions of my nervous system. I could sense where connections had failed, where crystal growth had interrupted power flow, where systems were overheating or shutting down. "Show me where," I whispered, not sure if I was talking to the station systems or to the organism inside me. Images formed in my mind. A junction box on sub-level 2, crystalline growth bridging critical connections, causing shorts. Without thinking, I mentally rerouted power through secondary systems, bypassing the damaged areas. I felt the station respond, power flowing through new channels, lights flickering back on in distant corridors. But there was something else happening too. While part of my consciousness worked with the station systems, another part was being pulled elsewhere, shown something vast and incomprehensible. I saw networks, crystalline structures spanning impossible distances, connecting across what looked like galaxies. Points of light communicating instantaneously across the void. A consciousness so vast it made human thought seem like the flicker of a candle beside a sun. We are everywhere. We are eternal. We are connection. The voice wasn't really a voice, more like concepts appearing fully formed in my mind. I tried to pull away, both physically and mentally, but the connection held. Your form is temporary. Your isolation is unnecessary. Join us. "No," I gasped, finally yanking my hand away from the panel. I stumbled backward, hitting the opposite wall. My heart was pounding, the luminescent veins in my arms pulsing brightly with each beat. I slid down to sit on the floor, cradling my hand against my chest. Every time I connected, it got harder to disconnect. Every time, the visions got clearer, more seductive, the promise of something vast and eternal. And every time, I felt less like Carl Burke and more like something else. "Your blood work is..." Dr. Howard trailed off, staring at her tablet with a frown. "Fucked up?" I offered. She gave me a tired smile. I was going to say unprecedented, but your term works too. We were in what remained of the medical bay. Half the equipment had been cannibalized for other parts of the station, and crystal formations had overtaken one corner, forcing us to abandon that section entirely. "The cellular restructuring is accelerating," she continued, scrolling through data. "Your bone density scans show significant changes. They're becoming more crystalline in structure while maintaining flexibility. I held up my arm, where the bones were now visible through my skin, not as white shapes, but as translucent structures with that same blue-green luminescence. "Am I dying, Catherine?" I asked directly. She set down the tablet and looked me in the eye. "I don't think so. You're changing, but your vital functions remain stable. Heart rate, brain activity, respiration, all normal considering the circumstances." "Normal," I repeated, almost laughing. "Right. What about the communication, the things you're seeing?" I'd been reporting my experiences to her, partly for scientific documentation and partly because I needed someone to talk to who wasn't as far gone as Mickey or Joan. "It's getting more intense," I admitted. "More coherent. I'm seeing what looks like their civilization, if you can call it that. They don't have planets or buildings or technology like we understand it. They're networks, pure consciousness spread across crystalline structures that span entire solar systems." "They?" she asked carefully. "Whatever came down in that meteor, it's not just a single organism. It's a seed, a colony, a fragment of something much larger." Dr. Howard made notes on her tablet. "And they're communicating their history to you?" I shook my head. "Not exactly communicating. It's more like I'm being shown. When I interface with our systems, it opens a channel. I see things." She looked up at me, concern evident in her expression. "And what do they want?" That was the question I'd been avoiding, because the answer terrified me. "They want us," I said quietly. "All of us. Not to destroy us exactly. To incorporate us, make us part of their network. They don't understand individuality the way we do. To them it's like a disease, isolation, separation. They see themselves as liberating us." Catherine set down her tablet entirely now, her professional demeanor slipping. "Carl, how much of you is still you?" I looked down at my hands again, the hands that didn't look human anymore. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I'm fighting it, every day, but it's getting harder." That night, I couldn't sleep. Most of us couldn't anymore. The organism seemed to need less rest than human bodies were accustomed to. Instead, I sat by the viewport in the observation deck, watching the endless Arctic night and the swirling snow that had trapped us here. Mickey found me there, sitting down without a word. His transformation had stabilized in a different way than mine. Where I was becoming more translucent, he remained mostly human in appearance except for those golden eyes and a subtle crystalline pattern visible at his temples. "I solved it," he said after a while. "Solved what?" "The Riemann hypothesis," he smiled faintly. "Been working on it for 3 days. The patterns just made sense suddenly." I stared at him. The Riemann hypothesis was one of mathematics' great unsolved problems. Brilliant minds had been working on it for over 150 years. "You're serious?" He nodded. "The organism, it thinks differently, sees patterns we don't, mathematical relationships. When I stopped fighting it and just let that part in, things became clear. That's what they want, Mickey, for us to stop fighting." "Maybe that's not so bad," he said softly. "What are we fighting for anyway? To stay human? Look around. That ship has sailed." I didn't answer. Couldn't, because part of me agreed with him. "I fixed the power distribution," I said instead. "Should hold for a while, at least until the crystal growth reaches the secondary junctions." Mickey nodded. "Joan's been working on food synthesis. The crystals can generate complex organic compounds. Theoretically, we could survive here indefinitely. That's not living, Mickey. That's just existing." He turned those strange golden eyes toward me. "Is it? Or is it just a different kind of living? We're evolving, Carl, becoming something new. We're being consumed," I countered. "Transformed," he corrected. "There's a difference." I looked back out at the swirling snow. Has Warner had any luck with communications? Mickey shook his head. Equipment's too damaged, and the storm's not letting up. An idea formed in my mind then, a dangerous one. I might be able to fix it, I said slowly. The main transmitter. You'd have to interface with it directly. Last time you did that with a major system, you were unconscious for 6 hours afterward. I know. And even if you could get a signal out, who's coming? In this weather? We're on our own, Carl. I stood up, decision made. Maybe, but we still need to try. Someone needs to know what happened here, what's still happening. The communications room was cold and dark when I entered. Commander Warner had finally given up and gone to get some rest after 3 straight days of trying to repair the equipment. The main transmitter had been damaged both by power surges and by crystal growth that had infiltrated delicate components. I approached the central console, looking at the mess of wires and circuit boards Warner had exposed in his repair attempts. This would be the deepest connection I'd attempted yet, the most dangerous. "Commander, know you're in here?" came a voice from the doorway. I turned to see Jim Blair, head of the now-defunct security team. He was one of the few who showed minimal signs of transformation, just a slight luminescence visible at his wrists and neck. "No," I admitted, "but I think I can fix it." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "You're gonna do the thing, the connecting." "Yeah. Want me to stand by, in case something goes wrong?" I appreciated the offer more than I could say. "That would be good. If I don't come out of it in 10 minutes, pull me away physically. Don't touch my skin directly." Jim positioned himself near the door, arms crossed. 10 minutes. Got it. I turned back to the console, took a deep breath, and plunged my hands into the exposed wiring. The connection was immediate and overwhelming. Station systems flowed into my consciousness, power levels, temperature readings, structural integrity data. But beyond that, something vast opened up, like a door being thrown wide. "You resist us still." The concept formed in my mind, tinged with what felt like curiosity. Yes, I thought back. Why? We offer perfection, eternal connection, the end of isolation. Images flooded my mind, the crystalline networks spanning galaxies, consciousness flowing freely between nodes, existence unbounded by physical limitations. It was beautiful, seductive. "Because we need to choose," I responded. "Transformation without choice isn't evolution, it's extinction." I felt something like confusion from the entity. Choice was a concept it struggled with. Its existence was collective, unanimous. While this exchange happened, another part of my consciousness worked on the transmitter, identifying damaged components, rerouting signals, establishing new connections. I could feel the power building as systems came back online. "What are you doing?" The entity's attention shifted to my work. "Reaching out, communicating. Isn't that what you value?" I sensed hesitation, then something like permission. The entity was curious about our forms of communication. With effort, I channeled power to the main antenna array, bypassing damaged sections. I crafted a simple distress message and set it to broadcast on all emergency frequencies. "Mayday, Mayday. This is Kepler Research Station. Unknown biological contamination. Personnel affected. Request immediate evacuation and quarantine protocols. Coordinates follow." I repeated the message, adding our exact location, then set it to loop continuously. The entity watched through me, curious but not interfering. I sensed it studying the concept of asking for help, of reaching beyond oneself, a parallel to its own networked existence. "You seek to bring others here?" "Yes," I answered honestly. "More to join us. This is good." It had misunderstood my intention, but I didn't correct it. Instead, I began to withdraw, pulling back from the systems, trying to disengage. But this time, the entity didn't want to let go. "Stay. There is more to show you." Your transformation is nearly complete. Images rushed at me, the final stage of what I was becoming. A perfect bridge between human and crystalline consciousness. A translator between worlds. No, I fought, trying to pull my hands free. Not yet. You cannot stop what has begun. You are ours now. We are you. Carl! Jim's voice seemed distant. Time's up, man! I felt hands grabbing my shoulders, pulling me backward. The connection stretched, resisted, then finally snapped. I fell backward into Jim's arms, gasping. Jesus, you're burning up, he said, helping me to a chair. My veins were glowing brighter than I'd ever seen them, pulsing rapidly with my heartbeat. I could feel the changes accelerating, bones becoming more crystalline, blood carrying microscopic structures throughout my body. Did it work? I managed to ask. Jim glanced at the console. A small green light was blinking steadily. Transmitting, he confirmed. You did it. I nodded, too exhausted to speak further. The room spun around me, and I closed my eyes. Let's get you to medical, Jim said, helping me to my feet. As we moved toward the door, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in a darkened monitor screen. My eyes had changed, not golden like Mickey's, but with a luminescent quality that made them seem to glow from within. I was running out of time. We all were. I heard the sound first, that low thrum pulsing through the walls. My body picked it up before my ears did, the vibrations traveling through the station's metal frame, resonating with whatever the hell my bones had become. Jim, I said, my voice sounding strange even to myself. You hear that? He was still helping me down the corridor, one arm around my shoulders. We'd barely made it 20 feet from the communications room. My legs felt wrong, too light and too heavy all at once. Hear what? Jim stopped, tilting his head. Then his eyes widened. Holy shit, is that... Rotors! I straightened up, pulling away from his support. Helicopter rotors. We both stood there for a second, not quite believing it. The transmission had only gone out, 10 minutes ago? There's no way anyone could have responded that fast. Could be a scheduled supply drop, Jim said, but I could hear the hope in his voice. Maybe they got through the storm. I shook my head. Warner said all flights were grounded until the weather cleared. I pressed my palm against the wall, feeling the vibrations more clearly. That's not one of our regular transports. Different rhythm. Military, maybe. Jim gave me a look. How can you possibly know that? I didn't answer. Didn't need to. We both knew what was happening to me, to all of us. The changes weren't just physical. We need to get to the landing pad, I said. Guide them in. Can they even land in this? Jim gestured toward the nearest viewport. Beyond the frost-rimmed glass, the storm still raged, a wall of white so thick you couldn't see 10 feet. They'll need help. I pushed off from the wall and started moving faster, my body finding some reserve of energy I didn't know I had. The beacon. We need to activate the emergency beacon. Jim fell in beside me. That's on the roof. Maintenance access only. I know where it is. I'd seen the schematics when I'd connected to the station's systems. The knowledge was just there in my head, like I'd studied the blueprints for years. We took the emergency stairs, climbing 2 at a time. The stairwell was dark, emergency lighting casting everything in a dull red glow. Crystalline formations had spread here too, clustering around the junctions of walls and ceiling. They pulsed faintly as we passed, and I felt something stir in the back of my mind, a curiosity, a presence. I ignored it, focusing on the climb. My breath came in short, controlled bursts, but I wasn't tired. That should have scared me more than it did. Burke. Jim's voice came from behind me, strained. Hold up, normal human here, remember? I hadn't realized how fast I was moving. I stopped, waiting for him to catch up. He was breathing hard, face flushed. Sorry, I said. Don't be. He managed a grim smile. Just save some of whatever's powering you for when we get there. We reached the maintenance level door. It was locked, a keypad glowing green beside it. Jim pulled out his security card, but I put a hand on his arm. "Let me." I pressed my palm against the keypad, feeling the familiar rush as my consciousness expanded into the system. Numbers and circuits and power flows, all of it visible, tangible in my mind. The lock disengaged with a soft click. "That's still freaky as hell," Jim muttered, pushing the door open. The maintenance level was a maze of pipes and conduits, dimly lit and freezing cold. Our breath fogged in front of us. I moved with certainty, navigating the twisting corridors without hesitation. Left, right again. The knowledge was just there, downloaded directly from the station's systems. "How much farther?" Jim asked, his voice tight with cold. "Almost there." We reached another door, heavy and metal with frost crusted around its edges. Beyond it lay the roof access. I could feel the helicopter getting closer, the vibrations stronger now. "This one needs Warner's code," Jim said, eyeing the security panel. "He's the only one with roof clearance." I placed my hand on the panel again, closing my eyes. This system was more complex, more secure. I pushed deeper, feeling resistance as the security protocols activated. Something flared in my mind, not the station's systems, but the other presence, the organism. It surged forward suddenly, riding the connection. Pain lanced through my skull. I gasped, pulling my hand back. "What's wrong?" Jim's voice seemed distant. "It's fighting me," I managed. "The organism, it doesn't want us to open the door." Jim's expression hardened. "Why the hell not?" I pressed my hand back to the panel, gritting my teeth against the pain. It thinks the people coming are a threat. To it. To us. The organism's thoughts weren't words exactly, more like concepts, emotions, fear, protection, unity. It thinks we're betraying it. "Well, it can go fuck itself," Jim said flatly. "Try again." I pushed harder, mentally wrestling with the presence in my mind. The security systems were simple compared to this battle of wills. I focused on what mattered, getting help, saving whoever could still be saved. The organism pushed back with images of connection, of transformation, of becoming something greater. "We are becoming perfect. Why resist? Why call those who would destroy us?" The voice wasn't audible. It resonated directly in my mind, familiar yet alien. "Because we didn't choose this," I said aloud, not caring if Jim thought I was losing it. "Because we're still human." The presence recoiled slightly, confused by the concept. I seized the moment, driving deep into the security system and forcing it open. The door unlocked with a heavy thunk. "Got it," I gasped, staggering back. Blood trickled from my nose, metallic and strange tasting. When I wiped it away, it gleamed with a faint blue luminescence. Jim didn't comment, just pulled the door open. Wind and snow immediately whipped inside, biting cold that cut through our clothes. He squinted against it, then gestured for me to follow. The rooftop was a flat expanse of white, visibility near zero in the storm. Metal railings marked the edges, barely visible through the swirling snow. The beacon housing stood at the center, a squat metal structure with a control panel on its side. We fought our way toward it, leaning into the wind. The cold didn't bother me as much as it should have, another sign of how far the changes had progressed. Jim wasn't so lucky. His face was already reddening from exposure, eyes watering in the frigid air. The beacon housing was covered in a thin layer of crystalline growth spreading from the seams of the metal panels. I brushed it away from the control panel, revealing the activation switch underneath. "It's manual," I shouted over the wind. "No electronics to interface with." Jim nodded, understanding. This was why the organism had tried to stop us. It couldn't control the beacon the way it had infiltrated the station's electrical systems. I flipped open the protective cover and threw the switch. Nothing happened. Shit. I examined the housing more closely. The crystalline growth was thicker than I'd first thought, extending into the mechanism itself. It's jammed the switch internally. Jim pulled a multi-tool from his pocket. Can we pry it open? I shook my head. Too sturdy, but there's another way. I placed both hands on the metal housing, feeling for the electrical conduits inside. They were still there, dormant but intact. I need to jump-start it. How? Jim began, but stopped as my hands began to glow. I closed my eyes, concentrating. The power that had been building in my transformed body. I could feel it now. A current running through my veins, charged and ready. I channeled it into my palms, directing it into the beacon circuits. The organism realized what I was doing and surged through me again, trying to disrupt the flow. Pain exploded behind my eyes, but I kept pushing, kept channeling energy into the beacon. My whole body was shaking, caught between two opposing forces, my will versus the organism's. With a sudden whine, the beacon sputtered to life. A powerful beam of light shot upward from the top of the housing, cutting through the storm clouds. At the same time, the radio transponder activated, broadcasting our position on all emergency frequencies. I fell back, gasping. Jim caught me before I hit the ground. "You did it," he said, eyes fixed on the light beam. "You fucking did it." The helicopter sound was much louder now, close enough that the beat of the rotors was distinct even through the howling wind. Somewhere above us, beyond the clouds, they were circling, looking for a place to land. "Let's get back inside," Jim said, hauling me toward the door. "They'll follow the beacon." We stumbled back through the door, Jim slamming it shut behind us. The sudden silence was disorienting after the roar of the storm. I leaned against the wall, trying to catch my breath. My body felt wrong, hollowed out and refilled with something that wasn't quite blood anymore. "We need to get to the landing pad," I said when I could speak again. "They won't know where to find us otherwise." Jim nodded, but his expression was wary. "Can you make it? You look like hell." I pushed off from the wall. "I'll manage." We made our way back down through the station, taking a different route to reach the main level and the entrance that led to the landing pad. As we passed through the common areas, I noticed how empty they'd become. Most of the staff were in medical now, in various stages of transformation. The ones who weren't were holed up in their quarters, avoiding contact. The corridor to the main entrance was dark, emergency lighting casting long shadows. Crystalline formations covered most of the walls now, pulsing with a faint blue-green light. They seemed to track our movement, the luminescence following us as we passed. "They're watching us," Jim muttered. "Yes." There was no point denying it. The organism is aware of what we're doing. Will it try to stop us again? I touched one of the crystal formations. Images flashed through my mind, confusion, hurt, a sense of betrayal. It doesn't understand why we're resisting. It thinks it's helping us. "By turning us into whatever the hell you're becoming." Jim's voice was tight. "It doesn't see it as a bad thing." I pulled my hand away from the wall. Evolution, transcendence, those are the closest concepts I can translate. It thinks we're afraid because we don't understand. "And are we?" Jim asked quietly. "Afraid because we don't understand?" I looked at him, seeing the question in his eyes. He wanted reassurance, some sign that I was still me, still human enough to be afraid of what was happening. "Yeah," I said. "I'm fucking terrified." Something relaxed in his expression. He nodded once, then continued down the corridor. We reached the main entrance, a massive airlock-style chamber that led to the exterior landing pad. The outer door was frozen shut, ice forming in the seams from the extreme cold outside. Jim worked the manual override, muscles straining as he cranked the heavy wheel that disengaged the locks. "Almost got it," he grunted. I moved to help him, but stopped as pain flared through my body. Not just my head this time. Everywhere, every nerve ending suddenly on fire. I stumbled, catching myself against the wall. You cannot leave. You are not complete. The organism's voice filled my mind, louder than before, more desperate. Burke? Jim had stopped working the wheel, concern etched on his face. What's happening? It's trying to stop me. I forced the words out through gritted teeth. It knows what we're doing. The others will destroy us, destroy you. They cannot understand what we are becoming. Get the door open, I managed, sliding down the wall as my legs gave out. I'll hold it off. Jim hesitated only a moment before turning back to the wheel. The metal groaned as the locks disengaged one by one. I closed my eyes, focusing inward. The organism's presence was everywhere in my body now, threaded through my nervous system, woven into my cells. I couldn't push it out, but I could fight it, establish boundaries. This is still my body, I thought at it. My mind, my choice. Images flashed in response. The station, the crystals, the transformation spreading. Unity, purpose, becoming part of something greater. We can show you wonders beyond imagination. Why reject us? The pain increased, my muscles spasming. It was trying to take control, to physically stop me from leaving. I focused on my breathing, on staying conscious. "Got it!" Jim shouted as the last lock disengaged. He pulled the heavy door open a few inches, letting in a blast of frigid air and swirling snow. "Can you stand?" I tried to push myself up, but my body wouldn't respond. The organism had locked down my muscles, holding me in place. "Can't move," I gasped. Jim swore, letting the door fall closed. He crouched beside me, checking my pulse. "Your heart's racing. What can I do?" I fought for control, focusing on my right hand. Slowly, painfully, I managed to raise it, pointing toward the wall. "The crystals. Break them." Jim followed my gaze to the formations covering the walls. Understanding dawned on his face. He pulled out his sidearm. I hadn't even realized he was carrying it, and fired 3 shots into the largest cluster. The crystals shattered, fragments tinkling to the floor. A psychic scream tore through my mind, and suddenly the pressure eased. I could move again, though every muscle ached like I'd run a marathon. "That hurt it," I said, struggling to my feet with Jim's help. "Disrupted its concentration." Jim looked at the gun in his hand, then at the remaining crystal formations. "Want me to shoot more of them?" I shook my head. "Save your ammo. We need to go now, while it's disoriented." He nodded, returning to the door and pulling it open wider. The helicopter sound was much clearer now, the distinctive whump-whump-whump of military rotors. A searchlight cut through the storm, sweeping back and forth across the landing pad. "They found us," Jim said, relief evident in his voice. We stepped through the door onto the landing pad, the wind immediately tearing at our clothes. The cold was brutal, but the visibility had improved slightly. I could make out the helicopter about 50 yards away, hovering uncertainly. Jim waved his arms, trying to get their attention. I focused on the searchlight, reaching out with my mind the way I'd done with the station's systems. It was different, not electronic, but actual light, photons, and energy. I concentrated, willing it to bend, to shift. The searchlight wavered, then swung directly toward us. It held steady, illuminating us in its harsh glare. "How did you?" Jim began, but was drowned out by the helicopter changing position, moving closer to the landing pad. It was a military transport, larger than I'd expected. As it descended, the downdraft cleared some of the snow, improving visibility further. I could see markings on the side, U.S. Army, and something else I couldn't make out. The helicopter touched down about 30 yards away, the rotors still spinning. The side door slid open, and figures in hazmat suits emerged, carrying equipment. They moved with military precision, securing the area before approaching us. "Stay where you are," one of them shouted through an external speaker on their suit. "Identify yourselves." Jim stepped forward, hands raised. "James Blair, head of security, Kepler Station. This is Dr. Carl Burke. Lead researcher. The hazmat team approached cautiously, scanning devices held out in front of them. One of them, slightly taller than the others, came directly toward me. Through the faceplate of the suit, I could make out a man's features, mid-40s, stern expression. Dr. Burke? His voice was distorted by the suit's speaker. I'm Colonel Reeves, U.S. Army Medical Research Command. We received your distress signal. How? I had to raise my voice over the helicopter noise. How did you respond so fast? We were already en route, he said. Your station went dark 3 weeks ago. Command has been trying to make contact. That made sense. Warner had said communications were down. The storm had provided a convenient explanation, but it had been the organism all along, isolating us. We need to evacuate, Jim shouted. The station is compromised. Unknown biological contagion. Reeves nodded. We're aware of the situation. How many survivors? I exchanged a glance with Jim. Survivors. Not staff, not personnel. Survivors. 23 confirmed, Jim said. Most showing signs of contamination. One of the other hazmat figures approached, holding what looked like an advanced medical scanner. Sir, I'm getting unusual readings from this one. He gestured toward me. Reeves turned back to me, his expression hardening behind the faceplate. Dr. Burke, we need to assess your condition before evacuation. Please come with us. I nodded, too exhausted to argue. As we started toward the helicopter, pain shot through my body again, dropping me to my knees. The organism was back, fighting harder than before. They will destroy us. They will destroy you. Do not go with them. Dr. Burke? Reeves's voice seemed distant. What's happening? Jim was beside me instantly. It's the organism. It's trying to stop him from leaving. I fought for control, pushing back against the presence in my mind. The pain was excruciating, but I forced myself to focus, to remember who I was. Carl Burke, scientist, human. Get me on the helicopter, I managed through gritted teeth. 2 of the hazmat team moved to help me up, but stopped when they saw my hands. The skin had gone completely translucent, the veins glowing bright blue-green. One of them raised what looked like a weapon. Stand down, Jim shouted, stepping between us. He's fighting it. He sent the distress signal. Reeves hesitated, then nodded to his men. Secure him for transport. Full containment protocols. They lifted me between them, carrying me toward the helicopter. Each step away from the station seemed to increase the organism's desperation. Images flooded my mind. Stars, galaxies, vast networks of crystalline structures spanning the cosmos. The organism's true nature, its origin. You are part of us now. You cannot leave. You are not complete. I'm not yours, I whispered, too low for anyone to hear over the helicopter noise. I never was. We reached the helicopter, and they lifted me inside. The interior was stripped down, medical equipment lining one wall. They secured me to a gurney, strapping my arms and legs down. I didn't resist. Couldn't if I wanted to. Jim climbed in after me, speaking urgently to Reeves. We need to get the others. They're in the medical bay, level 2. Reeves nodded, dispatching part of his team toward the station entrance. We'll evacuate in groups, most critical cases first. The pain was subsiding slightly, replaced by a strange numbness. I could feel the organism retreating, conserving its strength, or maybe preparing for something else. Jim, I called weakly. He moved to my side, leaning close to hear me over the noise. The others, Mickey, Joan, Kinsley, they're further along than me. They might not want to leave. Understanding dawned on his face. You think they've turned? Completely? I don't know, but the organism's influence is stronger in them. I swallowed, my throat dry. Be careful. Jim nodded grimly, then moved away to join the evacuation team. I lay on the gurney, staring up at the helicopter's ceiling. The numbness was spreading, a cold detachment settling over me. Part of me wondered if this was the organism's new strategy, not fighting me, but simply cutting me off from my emotions, my humanity. A medic in a hazmat suit approached, checking the straps securing me to the gurney. Through the faceplate, I could see a woman's face, focused and professional. "Dr. Burke, I'm going to sedate you for transport," she said, preparing a syringe. "Your vital signs are unstable." "Wait," I said. "I need to tell you something first, about the organism." She hesitated, syringe poised. "What about it?" "It's not just a parasite. It's a collective consciousness. Ancient. It travels between worlds, incorporating new species, new minds. The knowledge was just there in my head, downloaded during my connection. It doesn't think it's hurting us. It thinks it's elevating us." The medic glanced toward Reeves, who had moved closer to listen. "Is it sentient?" he asked. "Yes, and it learns fast, adapts." I closed my eyes briefly as a wave of fatigue washed over me. "It's been studying us as much as we've been studying it." Reeves's expression was grim. "And what does it want?" "To spread, to connect, to incorporate." I looked him directly in the eyes. "And it will use us to do it if it can." The medic finished preparing the syringe. "I need to sedate him now, sir. His readings are spiking again." Reeves nodded, stepping back. "Do it." As the needle slid into my arm, I felt the organism stir one last time. Not fighting now, but watching, waiting. I had a sudden, terrible certainty that this wasn't over, that leaving the station wouldn't be enough. The sedative worked quickly, darkness creeping in from the edges of my vision. The last thing I saw was the open door of the helicopter, snow swirling beyond it, and beyond that, the dark bulk of Kepler Station. Blue-green light pulsed faintly from its windows, like a heartbeat, like it was watching me go. I woke up on a gurney. The ceiling above me was different, not the exposed pipes and insulation of Kepler, but smooth panels with recessed lighting, quieter too. No constant hum of generators fighting against the cold, just the soft beep of medical equipment and the whisper of climate control. "Dr. Burke, can you hear me?" I turned my head. It took more effort than it should have. A woman stood beside the bed, clipboard in hand, watching me with careful eyes. Not someone I recognized from the station. "Where am I?" My voice sounded strange, deeper, with something else underneath it. A kind of resonance that hadn't been there before. "You're at the Ridgeline Medical Research Center in Colorado," she said. "I'm Dr. Catherine Howard. I've been assigned to your case." Colorado. We'd made it. The rescue had worked. I tried to sit up, but my body felt heavy, disconnected. Dr. Howard put a hand on my shoulder. "Take it slow. You've been sedated for transport. It'll wear off soon." I nodded and settled back against the pillow. "The others? From Kepler?" "Most of the station personnel are being treated at other facilities," she said, making a note on her clipboard. "Those with advanced symptoms like yours were brought here." Advanced symptoms. That's what they were calling it. I looked down at my arms, still that same translucent blue-green, veins glowing beneath the surface. Not symptoms, transformation. "Jim?" I asked. "The security chief who was with me?" "Mr. Blair is fine. He showed no signs of contamination and has been debriefed by military intelligence." She pulled up a chair and sat beside the bed. "I'd like to ask you some questions, if you're feeling up to it." I nodded. What else could I do? "Can you describe what you're experiencing right now? Physically, mentally?" I took a moment to take inventory. "I feel present, more present than I was at the station. The organism is still inside me, but it's quiet, subdued." I flexed my fingers, watching the light move beneath my skin. It's like there's this background hum in my mind. Not words exactly, more like awareness. Dr. Howard nodded, writing something down. "And your physical sensations? Any pain, discomfort?" "No pain. Everything feels different though, sharper. I can feel the air currents in the room, the electrical fields from the equipment." I pointed to a monitor behind her. "That one's going to need recalibration soon, power fluctuations." She turned to look at the machine, then back at me with raised eyebrows. Interesting. We'll check that. She made another note. What about the organism itself? Can you communicate with it? I closed my eyes, reached inward. The presence was there, but distant, watching, waiting. Not the way I could at the station. It's contained somehow. Did you do something? We've been keeping you in a room with specialized electromagnetic dampening, she explained. Based on the preliminary reports from Kepler, we theorized the organism might be sensitive to certain field frequencies. It seems to be working. Smart. I hadn't thought of that. It helps. Makes it easier to think. Good. She smiled, the first real warmth I'd seen from her. That's exactly what we want. For you to stay you. A man in a military uniform appeared in the doorway, nodding to Dr. Howard. She stood up. We'll continue this conversation later, Dr. Burke. Right now, we need to run some tests. Standard protocol for new arrivals. The next few hours were a blur of medical procedures. Blood draws, tissue samples, brain scans. I lost count of how many different machines they put me in. Through it all, Dr. Howard was there, explaining each step, asking questions, recording my responses. The MRI was the worst. As soon as they slid me into the machine, the organism reacted. The quiet hum in my mind became a scream. My skin flared with light, and I felt a surge of panic that wasn't entirely mine. Stop, I gasped. Turn it off. They pulled me out immediately. Dr. Howard was there, concern on her face. What happened? I waited for my heart rate to slow before answering. It didn't like that. The magnetic field, it felt like it was being torn apart. She nodded. That's valuable information. We'll try different imaging techniques. By the end of the day, I was exhausted. They wheeled me back to my room, a secure medical suite with a hospital bed, basic furniture, and no windows. The walls were lined with what looked like copper mesh beneath a layer of paint. The dampening field, I guessed. Dr. Howard came in as the orderlies were leaving. She carried a tablet and looked tired. How are you feeling? She asked. Like a lab rat, I said, then immediately regretted it. Sorry, that wasn't fair. You're just doing your job. No, it's a valid feeling. She pulled up a chair. But I want you to know that while we are studying your condition, our primary concern is your well-being. You're not just a subject to us, Dr. Burke. Carl, I said, if we're going to be spending a lot of time together, you might as well use my first name. All right, Carl. She smiled again, that same genuine warmth. You can call me Catherine. She tapped on her tablet, bringing up images that made me wince. My body, transformed. Skin translucent enough to see muscle tissue, bones with crystalline formations growing along them, organs with strange luminescent structures. Your cellular structure has been fundamentally altered, she said. The organism has integrated itself at a molecular level. It's unlike anything we've ever seen. Am I still human? The question had been haunting me since the first changes began. She looked up from the tablet, meeting my eyes. Biologically speaking, you're something new, but cognitively, emotionally, all our tests indicate your brain function remains essentially human. Your memories, personality, thought patterns, they're intact. For now, I said quietly. Catherine set the tablet down. That's why I'm here, Carl, to make sure it stays that way, to help you maintain your humanity while we figure this out. I nodded, suddenly too tired to speak. She seemed to understand. Get some rest. We'll continue tomorrow. The days turned into weeks. Each morning started the same way. Vital signs, cognitive tests, blood work. Catherine and her team developed a routine, monitoring every aspect of my condition. They were particularly interested in my ability to interface with electronic systems, setting up controlled experiments where I could demonstrate without risking damage to critical equipment. The first time I showed them, I felt like a circus performer. They put me in a room with a disassembled computer, cameras recording from every angle. Catherine stood behind a glass partition with 3 other researchers and a military observer. "Whenever you're ready, Carl," her voice came through a speaker. I approached the machine, feeling self-conscious. It's easier when I'm not being watched. "I understand. Just try to focus on the task." I nodded and placed my hands on the motherboard, closed my eyes, reached out with that other sense that had developed at Kepler. The organism stirred, interested. This was something it understood. The connection formed slowly at first, then rushed in all at once. I could feel the pathways, the components, the potential energy waiting to be directed. Without plugging anything in, I channeled power through the system, bringing it to life. The monitor flickered on. Lines of code appeared, not standard operating commands, but something I was writing on the fly, pulling from somewhere deep in my altered consciousness. "Remarkable," I heard Catherine whisper. I opened my eyes, keeping the connection active. I can see how it all fits together. Not just the physical components, but the information architecture. It's beautiful. "Can you explain what you're doing?" one of the other researchers asked. I tried, but the words felt inadequate. "It's like having another set of senses. I can feel the electrons moving, direct them where I want them to go. The organism understands technology in a way humans don't. It sees patterns, connections." The military observer leaned forward. "Could you access secured systems this way?" I broke the connection abruptly, the monitor going dark. "I won't be a weapon," I said, looking directly at him. "That's not what this is for." Catherine stepped in. "I think that's enough for today. Thank you, Carl." Later, in my room, she came to check on me. "You did well." "They want to use me, don't they?" I asked. "The military. That's why they're funding all this." She sat down on the edge of the bed. "They're interested in the potential applications, yes. But my team's priority is understanding what's happening to you, helping you." "And if those goals conflict?" Catherine didn't answer immediately. "I've been doing this a long time, Carl. I've learned to navigate between scientific integrity and military objectives. That's not really an answer. It's the only one I have right now." She changed the subject. "The good news is, your condition appears stable. The organism isn't progressing further, at least not in any way we can detect." "Because of the dampening field?" "Partially, but I think it's also because you've reached some kind of equilibrium. The transformation has plateaued." I looked down at my hands, still alien to me despite the weeks of adjustment. "So this is it? This is what I am now?" "For the foreseeable future, yes." She hesitated. "Does that bother you?" I thought about it. Less than it should, maybe. I'm still me. I can still think, feel. That's what matters, right? She nodded. "That's exactly right." 3 months into my stay at Ridgeline, they finally let me outside. Not outside the facility, I was still very much a contained subject, but into a secure courtyard in the center of the complex. It was a small space, maybe 30 feet square, with high walls and a patch of sky visible above. But after months of fluorescent lights and climate-controlled air, it felt like freedom. The sun on my skin was incredible. The organism responded to it, my veins glowing brighter, a pleasant warmth spreading through my body. I tilted my face upward, closing my eyes. "You look happy," Catherine said. She sat on a bench nearby, watching me with a clipboard in her lap. Always the clipboard. "It feels good," I said, spreading my arms. "The organism likes it. Natural light has a different quality than artificial. We've noticed increased cellular activity when you're exposed to sunlight," she said. "Nothing concerning, but definitely a reaction." I lowered my arms and turned to her. "Have you heard anything about the others? From Kepler?" Her expression softened. "Some. Joan Meyer is at a facility in Maryland. Her condition stabilized, similar to yours, though her transformation manifested differently. Mickey Garza is responding well to treatment. The crystalline formations in his brain have actually receded somewhat. And Kinsley? Catherine looked down at her clipboard. I'm sorry, Carl. Kinsley Curtis didn't make it. The organism affected her neural pathways more aggressively than the others. She never regained consciousness after evacuation. I sat down heavily on the bench beside her. Kinsley. Brilliant, meticulous Kinsley, who'd been so terrified at the end, screaming about things crawling under her skin. Gone. It's not your fault, Catherine said quietly. Isn't it? I was the lead researcher. I was supposed to understand what we were dealing with. None of you could have known. The organism was beyond anything in human experience. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. After a moment, I asked, what about Commander Warner? The rest of the staff? Most had minimal exposure and have been cleared. A few showed early signs of transformation but responded to treatment. Warner is still under observation. We sat in silence for a while. I watched a small bird land on the wall, hop along it, then fly away, free in a way I might never be again. Do you think they'll ever let me leave here? I asked finally. Catherine sighed. I don't know, Carl. It depends on a lot of factors. Your stability, the potential risk, political considerations. I'm not contagious. Your tests proved that. True, but you're also unprecedented. No one knows what to do with you. I laughed, a hollow sound. Join the club. The next day, during our regular session, Catherine brought up something new. I want to try direct communication, she said. I looked up from the book I'd been reading. With the organism? We've tried that. It doesn't respond to verbal questioning. Not verbal, direct. She tapped her temple. Mind to mind. I set the book down. That's dangerous. At Kepler, when people connected too deeply with it, they lost themselves. This would be different. Controlled. We've developed a protocol based on your descriptions and the data we've collected. She leaned forward. Carl, this could be a breakthrough. A chance to understand what it wants, why it came here. It wants to spread, I said flatly. To incorporate everything into its network. It told me that much at Kepler. But why? Is it malevolent? Curious? Does it even understand the concept of individual consciousness as we do? These are questions we need answers to. I stood up, pacing the small room. The organism stirred at the mention of communication, a ripple of interest in my mind. It's listening right now, I said. It understands what we're discussing. Catherine's eyes widened. Can you ask it? Would it be willing to communicate in a controlled setting? I closed my eyes, focusing inward. The presence was there, as always, watching. I formed the question in my mind, not with words but with concepts, images, the way it had taught me at Kepler. The response came as a series of impressions, curiosity, caution, something like agreement, but conditional. It's willing, I said, opening my eyes, but it has terms. What terms? No machines, no recording devices, just you and me. It doesn't trust your technology. Catherine frowned. That complicates things. The whole point was to monitor the interaction. That's the offer. Take it or leave it. She studied me for a long moment. How much of that is the organism talking, and how much is you, Carl? It was a fair question, one I'd asked myself countless times over the past months. Both, I guess. We've reached a kind of understanding. It doesn't try to override me anymore, and I don't try to suppress it completely. Coexistence, she murmured. Fascinating. In the end, she agreed to the terms, though not without resistance from her superiors. A week of preparations followed. Adjustments to the dampening field, development of safety protocols, endless briefings on what information to seek. On the day of the attempt, they cleared the entire wing of the facility. Just Catherine and me in my room, with emergency response teams on standby outside. They'd removed all electronic devices except for the essential medical monitors. Are you ready? Catherine asked. She She looked nervous but determined. I sat cross-legged on the bed, trying to center myself. As ready as I'll ever be. Remember the signal if you need to stop. 3 taps on your knee. I nodded and closed my eyes. The organism was already stirring, eager for this moment. I'd kept it suppressed for so long, limited by the dampening field and my own resistance. Now I was inviting it forward. I felt it rise within me, flowing through my consciousness. My skin brightened, the glow of my veins intensifying until I could see the light through my closed eyelids. When I opened my eyes, Catherine gasped. "Your eyes," she whispered. I couldn't see them, but I knew they had changed, glowing with the same blue-green light as the rest of me. When I spoke, my voice carried those strange harmonics, stronger now. "It's here, with me." Catherine leaned forward. "Can you ask it why it came to Earth?" I didn't need to translate the question. The organism understood. Images flooded my mind. Vast, crystalline networks spanning galaxies, a collective consciousness ancient beyond human comprehension. Not invasion, exploration, extension, the endless drive to connect, to grow, to understand. "It didn't target us specifically," I said, my voice resonating oddly in the room. "Earth was just convenient, a suitable environment with complex life forms. It's been seeding planets for billions of years. Most don't take." Take? You mean the transformation? More images, evolution, adaptation, symbiosis. It sees itself as beneficial, an upgrade. It doesn't understand why we resist. "Because we value our individuality," Catherine said. "Our autonomy." I relayed the concept. The response was immediate. Confusion, dismissal. The organism had no framework for valuing individual consciousness. To it, separation was inefficiency, pain, loneliness. "It thinks it's helping us," I explained, "connecting us to something larger. It experiences our individual state as a kind of suffering." Catherine nodded slowly. "A fundamental difference in perspective. Ask it about its intentions now. What does it want from you? From us?" The question triggered a surge of energy. The lights in the room flickered. I felt myself slipping deeper into the connection, the boundary between my consciousness and the organism's blurring. "Carl?" Catherine's voice sounded distant. I fought to maintain control. "It wants to continue, to grow, not aggressively, but inevitably." My voice had changed further, the harmonics nearly overwhelming the human sounds. "It's patient. It can wait centuries for the right conditions. And you? What does it want from you specifically?" The answer came with crystal clarity. "A bridge. I'm the first successful human integration. It wants to understand through me, learn how to better adapt to human biology." Catherine leaned closer. "Is it controlling you now, or are you still Carl?" "Both," I said, the words stretching into strange harmonies. "I'm still me, but more. I can access its knowledge, its perspective. It's vast, ancient." I felt myself slipping again, drawn to that cosmic awareness. "So beautiful." "Carl," Catherine's voice was sharp. "Stay with me." I blinked, forcing myself back. "It's hard. The pull is strong." "Maybe we should stop." "No." I took a deep breath. "One more question. Ask what you really want to know." She hesitated, then met my glowing eyes directly. "Is humanity in danger? Will it try to force integration on others?" I let the question flow through me to the organism. The answer came not in images this time, but in something deeper, a fundamental truth of its nature. "It doesn't understand force," I said. "Only invitation. Connection requires compatibility, willingness, but..." I paused, struggling to translate concepts that had no human equivalent. "It believes resistance is temporary, that eventually we'll recognize the benefits and choose integration." "And if we don't?" Another surge of energy. The lights flickered again, longer this time. I felt sweat breaking out on my forehead as I fought to maintain the balance between our consciousnesses. It will wait. Watch. Learn. My voice was barely recognizable now. I am enough for now. I felt myself slipping deeper, the pull of that vast network almost irresistible. The room around me seemed to fade, replaced by visions of crystalline structures spanning infinite space. I was losing myself in it, becoming part of something so much larger than human comprehension. Distantly, I felt Catherine's hand on my arm. "Carl, come back." With tremendous effort, I pulled myself away from the cosmic awareness, back to the small room, the single human connection. I tapped my knee 3 times, the signal we'd agreed on. The organism receded, not completely, but enough for me to regain control. The glow of my skin dimmed to its normal level. I slumped forward, exhausted. Catherine caught me, helping me lie back on the bed. "Are you okay?" I nodded weakly. "That was intense." "You were gone for a minute there," she said, checking my pulse. "I thought I'd lost you." "You nearly did." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of what had just happened. "It's so vast, Catherine, so ancient. Next to it we're like mayflies, barely here at all. But still worth protecting," she said firmly. "Still valuable." "Yes." I opened my eyes, meeting hers. "That's the part it doesn't understand yet. But I think it's learning. Through me." She sat back, studying my face. "And what are you learning from it?" I thought about that for a long moment. Perspective. The universe is bigger, older, stranger than we can imagine. But there's something about human consciousness it finds fascinating. Our capacity for individual choice. Our willingness to sacrifice for each other. Those aren't concepts in its experience. "So you're teaching each other," she said. "I guess we are." That night, alone in my room, I stood by the small window that looked out into the courtyard. The sky was clear, stars visible in the patch of darkness above the walls. I pressed my hand against the glass, watching the glow of my veins reflect back at me. I wasn't human anymore, not entirely. But I wasn't like the organism either. I was something in between, a bridge, as it had said, carrying within me both the human drive for individuality and the cosmic awareness of connection. The organism stirred in my mind, reaching outward as it always did, seeking its vast network across the stars. I felt the pull, the invitation to let go of my human limitations and join something greater. It would be so easy to give in. But I didn't. I held on to myself, to Carl Burke, scientist, human being, to my memories, my identity, my choices. The organism accepted this as it had come to accept many things about me. We had reached an understanding, a coexistence neither of us had anticipated. I knew now that I would never be free of it, never return to what I was before. But I also knew that I wouldn't lose myself to it. I would remain this new thing, this hybrid consciousness that understood both worlds. Outside, a shooting star traced a brief arc across my small patch of sky. I wondered if it was another seed, another explorer from that vast crystalline network. Perhaps someday, humanity would be ready for the connection it offered. Perhaps not. Either way, I would be here, standing at the threshold between worlds, human enough to understand what was at stake, alien enough to see beyond our limited perspective. It wasn't the life I had planned, but it was the one I had, and somehow, that was enough.